I'll make no secret of it. I love the Zelda series. Amongst all the Nintendo franchises, it's been the most influential, and many of its games sit among my favorites of all time. I can seldom think of a Zelda game that's actually bad. No, we don't talk about those ones. I've always held the first Legend of Zelda in pretty high regard as well. There are many elements of its design that have gone on to influence the likes of Zelda Breath of the Wild and the titles that are no doubt going to come out in the series from here on. I love the adventure, I love the sense of discovery, but for as much as I adore these aspects of Zelda 1, this is actually my first time playing it to completion. Strange, I know. So, why haven't I completed it before? General NES jank. Nothing I hold personally against the game, honestly. Zelda, unlike Metroid 1, actually has a pretty solid foundation, with more technical gameplay issues holding it back rather than anything so much as actual bad design decisions. But that's enough with this prologue, let's get started. I wasn't going to talk about the story, since I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with it. Ganon kidnapped Zelda, killed his ass. About sums it up. I only bring it up here because I was a bit struck by the fact that the title screen is actually coherent and communicates the entire premise of the game clearly and effectively. Everything from the title screen to the attract mode screen sets up your goal in the game, and heck, even the items you'll be getting. Most of which lead to intuitive solutions if you know what they are. Zelda 1 doesn't really have anything in the way of environmental storytelling, unfortunately, but if that's the price to pay for a good adventure, I'd say it's well worth it. At least for the console era. Once again, Zelda 1 is a remarkably solid foundation for the series that arose from it. Not quite Super Mario Bros. Levels of solid, but damn close. Of course it is. Zelda 1 has been the base of pretty much every 2D Zelda to arise since, mechanically speaking. It's a top-down adventure. You poke things with various forms of stick, and this is your standard gameplay. And I bring it up because it is flawed. While I don't like comparing a game to entries that came out later, I feel this one is unavoidable and important. The sword swing, or jab in this case, isn't great. It's manageable in combat at best, it gets the job done, and in most instances it'll even get the job done well. But there's exactly one thing about the sword in this game that anyone who's played the later 2D entries will notice immediately, and that's how there's no swing arc on your attacks. It doesn't sound like an issue on paper, but when the game likes packing rooms with 6 or more enemies at a time, including entire rooms of dark nuts, i.e. enemies that cannot be attacked from the front, you can immediately feel the lack of precision. After an adjustment period, it's certainly manageable, as I mentioned before, but it is a flaw, and it's hard not to appreciate how quickly they rectified this problem in the later entries. Swordplay aside, the items are where Link's abilities become particularly robust. If you'll recall, I mentioned how these items listed in the attract mode screen are actually intuitive views, so let me explain. Boomerang is self-explanatory. Bombs function as both an attack and a means by which you can open hidden passages, and that becomes mandatory in certain dungeons. Candle can be used to light dark rooms and burn certain plants. Some would argue that the hidden passages uncovered with the candle and bombs are obtuse, but since they're not projected in any way, I kind of agree. I don't think it's a good design, but then again, it's not exactly bad design as long as it's established as possible, which as far as I can tell, it isn't in this game. Moving on, the raft is a bit bewildering in terms of where it's useful, but it's used to cross bodies of water from docks, similar to the stepladder in how it allows you to cross single tiles of water and lava. Albeit the stepladder is more universally useful, since it's effectively giving you a free platform to navigate the world with that doesn't interfere with the game flow, and is implemented in a completely passive manner. The only real item in the game I actually found that's noteworthy for being bad is the recorder, which is used to both make the boss Digdogger vulnerable and to open Dungeon 7. I'm honestly not sure how that was intended to be solved without Nintendo power or word of mouth, but then again, going off developer interviews with Miyamoto, it may have very well been designed to be obtuse and hard to figure out without word of mouth. Is that a good design decision? Is it bad? I'm of the opinion that it's bad, but there are hints in the game towards using the recorder this way, so it's not completely baseless. While there are more items in the game, that's really all I found worth noting. Most of them are just additional buffs to Link, or a magic wand, which is effectively just a replacement for the sword in a way. It's basically a permanent sword beam. Like I said, nothing really noteworthy. But there actually is one more thing regarding items, though admittedly this is more of a power-up than a traditional Zelda item. The clock. This item, when touched, will stop all enemies from moving, though not projectile-spewing hazards, strangely. But yes, the clock is probably the only temporary power-up in the game. It's not a common drop, but when you do get it, oh, is it a relief. Especially if you get in a room full of Dark Nuts. As you recall, Dark Nuts can't be hit head-on, so for them, it's a fucking lifesaver. I swear those guys know when you're next to them. Now, last up is overworld and dungeon design. Overworld is pretty straightforward. Most screens are unique enough that getting lost shouldn't be a problem, and dungeons are projected pretty clearly with nifty monument designs standing outside, with some exceptions, most notably Dungeon 7 onward. I had a lot of fun exploring the world. In fact, that's a big part of why I like coming back to Zelda 1 so much, despite having never beaten it before this critique. The dungeons themselves are actually pretty fun, if not a bit straightforward. There's not much in the way of puzzles that many of us have gotten accustomed to, unless you consider navigation a puzzle, of course. And in that regard, some of the later stages can become an absolute nightmare of dead ends and wasted hearts. That's not a bad thing necessarily, as it does add to the exploration element. If the dungeons were more straightforward, then it may as well just be a guided tour. What impressed me was that, while basically being combat gauntlets, each dungeon still managed to convey some personality. Most of this comes down to enemies present and the odd navigational trick, like the frequent wall bombings of Dungeon 6. But this goes a long way in making the dungeons less of a slog. Ultimately, the game is good. It solidified itself as one of the best NES games of all time, and having played it through to completion myself, it's easy to see why. Apart from some obtuse elements, the game holds up. It can be a bit stiff, and the enemies can easily overwhelm you at times, but if you're playing on Wii U or 3DS, you may consider using save states. But the game isn't so difficult that it ever feels all that necessary. Now, the only reason I ended up using it was because I couldn't figure out how to save without dying. Whew, I had more to say about this game than I thought I would. I guess that speaks to the quality. Consider this a recommendation to try it out at the very least. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I think there's been an issue with the subs box lately. Not sure if my videos are actually showing up in y'all's subscriptions, so consider clicking the bell icon to get notified when I release a video. If not, I bring out new content every Thursday at 3 PM CST, save for unforeseen delays. That said, I hope you all have a fantastic night and that this video lit a fire under you.